Hello everyone, I'm Soma Mazumdar.
And I'm Orod and welcome to Kanban Lab podcast. In each episode, we'll pick a common question and dive into a different aspect of Kanban, exploring its principles, practices, and applications, and answering that question.
Our goal in this podcast is to demystify Kanban and help listeners understand how it can benefit their teams and organizations through addressing the common misconceptions, clarifying concepts, and answering questions about Kanban.
Good morning, Soma. How are you? How's the weather in Sydney? This time I ask you the weather first.
That is so true. Okay, I am going well, and it is sunny and bright in Sydney. What about Melbourne?
Melbourne is really good, nice and fresh, and a little bit chilly, but good breeze. We have a breeze, which is good.
Oh, that's pretty
Yes,
cool. Yeah,
and I'm very happy today and excited.
that's even better, right?
All right. So, what do you have today, Soma? What have you heard recently?
Actually, my question for today's episode is based on something that you have, what do you say, encountered very recently. It's a
Okay.
question that is like everywhere. Is Kanban an agile framework?
Oh, that's a very good one. Yes, exactly. I think yesterday there was a very big post on LinkedIn that I've seen exactly the same thing, which went quite viral.
Mm.
So someone said Kanban is not an agile framework, and a lot of people have been agreed with him, but most people they basically had different opinions. So I think that's a really good topic
Mm.
to talk today.
Yeah.
So, first of all, is Kanban an agile framework or not?
Mm.
To be honest, it's not very important, but
Mm.
because as long as something helps us, it doesn't really matter what we call it. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think we can look at it and try to discuss an answer to this question with some fact and stuff like that and clarify it a little bit because as soon as we say agile and framework,
Mm.
people have some expectation,
Mm.
right? And that's what I like to focus a little bit more. But before we get into that, I think we need to define what is agile and what is framework. What is the definition of agile and what is the definition of a framework?
Mm.
What do you think?
Definitely. Let's start with
Yeah.
that, like the basics.
And yeah, and when we define it, then we can also say, okay, now based on this definition, is
Mm.
Kanban an agile framework or not?
Mm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So when we ask someone, okay, as my point of view, when we say something is agile, whatever it
Mm.
is, right?
Mm.
I refer back to Agile Manifesto, all
Yes,
right, which
exactly.
has 4 values and 12 principles.
That's
And
right.
to me, when someone or an organization or team or framework or whatever
Mm.
embrace and believe in those values and principles, then
Mm.
I call it agile,
Yes.
right? So agile team is a team that believe in Agile Manifesto, which means they value
Mm.
communication between people
Mm.
more than the processes and tools,
Mm.
right? Or they respond to change, they value response
Mm.
to change more than sticking to the scope and contract and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and other principles. All right.
Mm.
So is this aligned with your definition of Agile?
Yeah, definitely. The
Okay.
Agile
Yeah.
Manifesto and the principles are the basis of it,
Yeah.
and all the frameworks have, like they have embraced that in the framework, in the definitions.
Yeah.
That's why it is called an Agile framework.
Good. So now framework. So what is framework? Again, to me,
Mm.
other people might have different opinion, and I'm open to hear their opinion. To me, framework is something that tell us how to work.
Mm.
Draw some line.
Mm.
If you, while you are within those lines,
Mm.
then you are within this framework. I think that's what we call it framework. So there is a
Mm.
frame around how we want to work together.
Mm. Yeah, the
Okay?
structures. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So now, if this framework embrace agile manifesto values and principles,
Mm.
then we can call it agile framework.
Yes.
Okay?
Mm.
If I don't know, if a team embrace it, we call it agile team. If
Mm.
a company embrace it, we call it agile company.
Mm.
Okay? Does that make sense?
Mm.
Good. All right. So again, do you also have similar definition of framework?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is very similar to what you said. So
Okay.
frameworks are like they will provide you with the guiding principles
Mhm.
or the structure, and you are expected to be autonomous within that. So
Yeah.
you are empowered to try out new things, but you do have a, what do you say, like a guiding boundary.
Boundary. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. All right. So now let's have a look and see what is Kanban and see if Kanban fit into the definition of an agile framework or not.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So based on Kanban University, which we referring to,
Hmm.
Kanban is a knowledge management method
Hmm. Yeah.
that use Kanban board to
Hmm.
visualize the work and the flow of the work.
Hmm.
And it has some principles, it has its own principles and practices
Practice.
that help us to manage this knowledge work better.
Yes.
And the goal is to design a Kanban system to
Hmm.
balance between what comes to the system
Hmm.
and what leave the system,
Yeah.
right? So this is the goal.
Hmm.
Kanban principles. So Kanban basically never said that I embrace everything that it's in Agile framework,
Hmm.
right? So Kanban always said that I respect the people and how the people work and the
Hmm.
titles and all those kind of things,
Exactly.
regardless if those people,
Hmm.
work in an Agile company or not,
Hmm.
whatever they do, it can be waterfall, right?
Yes.
I'm here and I have some practices and some principles that you can use it and
Hmm.
help you to whatever you do better.
Yes.
That company or that team can be an agile team, can be waterfall team.
Hmm.
It can be knowledge work or it can be something else, but our focus will be knowledge work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for example, in Kanban, we normally say that, okay, response to if the company value responding to change
Hmm.
over following the plan,
Hmm.
that's good. Do it. If they don't believe in that and you say, okay, no, I want to stick to the scope and I don't like respond to changes
Hmm.
for whatever reason, again, it's okay. So
Yeah.
when they get to the maturity, they understand that, okay, this is a knowledge work. You can't fix it.
Hmm.
And you have to respond to changes because there is always change, because that's
Exactly.
why we call it knowledge work, right?
Yeah.
So at the beginning, we don't know what it is. And then we learn over time.
Hmm.
And so we have to respond to change because when we learn, we realize that our hypothesis probably was wrong. Okay.
Yes.
So based on this, I don't necessarily think that Kanban is agile. However, it can definitely help team and organization to improve their agility, but it doesn't necessarily limited itself to that agile manifesto.
Exactly. And
And
on that, there's
just
one point.
okay,
Yeah.
yes, please.
Because while I remember, uh, the respond to change things that you spoke about, actually, Kanban is an evolutionary change technique.
Sure.
So it uses that. So what does it mean is that it is always collecting data and following the data based in the context. So for that, like there will be always experimentation going on in a small amount without disrupting the whole universe. And
Mm-hmm.
based on that result, you are always deciding that which way you need to go so that you
Mm-hmm.
are always relevant and fit for purpose. So
Sure.
that's another thing which is very important to understand about Kanban. And what you said about agility is bang on because Agile frameworks, Agile manifesto, or Kanban, the goal is the same.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Exactly.
achieving agility. And
Yeah.
this is another thing I believe that sometimes people do confuse with
Mm-hmm.
agile versus agility.
Mm-hmm.
We should be always following that agility is the goal.
Yes,
That's where we want to reach. Everyone wants to reach and achieve agility.
that's
Now,
right.
there are different ways and means of getting there. So,
Mm-hmm.
like agile frameworks are one, but then Kanban is also another one. Now, when I said that, I should get back to you. You were talking about something. Sorry about it. Just like I would have forgotten the point, but back to you.
No, no, no. What you said was absolutely valid, a very good point. Up to now, we explained that Kanban principles are not always necessarily aligned with Agile Manifesto. Now let's define what framework means and see if Kanban is a framework or not. Frameworks create a context that tells you how to work. For example, Scrum needs a cross-functional team, uh, including a business representative or product owner and a time box. However, Kanban doesn't tell you how to work. Kanban doesn't need a particular context to be effective. Kanban principles and practices can improve how you work regardless of your context. For example, Kanban never says one person should work on one job at a time. That completely depends on your context and need, and you can increase or decrease the number of work. What do you think?
I think again, we are focusing too much about how to reach agility. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why all this confusion, all these problems are arising that, like, is it agile? Is it non agile? That's not the question. Like, for
Mm,
example, all the practices and the principles that we have either in Kanban or in agile,
mm-hmm.
all it is trying to tell us is that keep your work simple, visualize this, respond to change, respect people.
Mm-hmm.
It's very similar, but with different sets of values, principles, and practices. And when it comes to, like having WIP limit as a practice, why is that even important if you think about it? So when we are on this, like the topic of Kanban, there's another thing that I think we should clarify.
Mm-hmm.
When people often say, that Kanban is best used for manufacturing units
Mm-hmm.
or operations type of work because it originated from Toyota. So, one of the things that I know recently for a fact that you did have a say about this on LinkedIn, and I did check your comment, and I really agree with you that how Kanban in modern time have been evolved
Mm-hmm.
and made it more suitable to fit the context in the modern world because we are in a very complex time. And
That's right.
definitely, even though things have originated from Toyota production system, the learnings have originated from there, but then how we have applied that in the knowledge management environment is totally
Mm-hmm.
different. And by different, what I mean is that it's 2.0 because we are in a complex world where we don't know what the solution looks like all the time. So we need to go through that whole process of, discovering, like always trying to understand the problem better, always focus on customers. So all these things have made Kanban a more fit for purpose management method where it is taking into fact like consideration about all these factors, and the
Mm-hmm.
practices and principles and the values in Kanban helps and guide people to reach the agility in a different way. So
Mm-hmm.
like if we have to compare it now, I'm going to do a little bit of compare, but there's no wrong or right. Like if someone is practicing Scrum versus someone is practicing Kanban, their goals are the same: to solve customer problems, to make like to
Yes.
serve our customer in a better way. But one of the framework uses time boxing. They try to simplify when they break their work down so that they can focus on that part of work and get it done, which is amazing if you think about it. On the
Mm,
other hand, Kanban focuses on flow. So rather than simplifying in the beginning, Kanban tries to figure out that how they can make the system more smoother
hmm
and better the flow so that the value can reach the customer at an earlier stage, like more faster.
hmm
The focuses might be different, but then when we think about it, customer is at the heart of both the things. So I really do not understand why even there is a fight going on LinkedIn or anywhere else about, you know, whether it's an agile framework or not. Instead of understanding that, let's focus on the goal, that how Kanban can help achieve agility,
Yeah.
and also all the different frameworks. So what do you think about that?
So the reason people were arguing, it's probably because they all think that they're right and they try to, inform other people or slash convince them or whatever, right? But as my point of view, the reason I like to talk about this topic today
Mm.
is to make sure people understand that Kanban doesn't draw that line that you
Yes,
have to be within.
exactly.
Otherwise, you make a mistake. And this is a very common kind of anti-pattern.
Mm.
People say, okay, Kanban is an agile framework.
Mm.
So from tomorrow, you have to have WIP limit, one work per person.
Mm.
This is your workflow, standardize the workflow,
Mm.
and do this. And now you are Kanban.
Mm.
Otherwise, you cross the line and you're not Kanban,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Excuse me. So I think that's why I like to a little bit clarify or demystify this concept to tell people that Kanban doesn't draw that line.
Mm.
So do you want to add? So I work with some team. I think in one of the episodes I mentioned that I
Yes.
didn't even add the WIP limit at the beginning,
Yeah.
right? Based on the maturity, right?
Mm.
When they get to the point that they realize there are so many work that I'm working with, then we can say, okay, do you want to limit it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Then you can add this
Yeah.
practice, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to add all the 5 or 6 Kanban practices at the
At the
same
same
time and
time.
design something for them and sell it to the client and say, this is
Exactly.
Kanban.
Yes. And one of the other thing is that you can apply Kanban principles, practices, values with any other framework that you're doing. Either
Hmm
it's agile or non-agile, doesn't matter.
That's right. Yeah.
So if you think about it, is it possible to merge, two agile frameworks together? And I would love to know, and that's a question for anyone who's listening to this episode. Is it possible that you are merging, let's say, like less and safe together? What would be the outcome? I would love to know.
So I think we
Yeah.
already have the answer, right? So for example, safe, try to use Scrum.
Mm.
Okay. Probably add things a little slightly change things and then Scrum people come and say, no, this is not Scrum. So
Mm.
now they call it Agile team rather than, I don't know, Scrum, and they call different things because they didn't want to mess with Scrum. It's like a good Scrum. This is what Scrum said. This is what Safe said, something like that. So I think to answer to this question, if the new framework
Mm.
doesn't break the value and key principles of the other framework, you can use it for sure. Otherwise, people will complain and say, oh, no, you're not this, you're not that.
Exactly. Yeah, then it would lose the essence of both the frameworks, and that's where I was coming to. Now, let's
Mm,
say we are combining two agile frameworks, and then, none of it is making sense because they are losing the core essence. So it might become a new emerging framework. That's a different question. But what I mean to say is that Agile is not a framework, and one of the best argument would be that when you combine sorry, Kanban is not an agile framework
Mm,
because when you combine Kanban with anything else, none of it loses the essence or the core values because it is more around how you think, how you work. It is
that's right.
focusing on the work. So
Yeah,
that's where the beauty comes from. And
exactly.
this is where I would say that, hey, this is one of the best experiment that you can also do and see that if you are applying any of the
Hmm.
Kanban practices, principles, or values in whatever you are doing, what is the outcome? Do you
That's right.
think that your framework is losing all its meaning, its values, its core, properties? If not, then that's your answer. That
Yeah.
okay,
So yeah, exactly. As you said, we definitely can use Kanban with anything else, anything agile, frameworks, waterfall, whatever that they do. And in fact, I think in last episode we uh, talk about how Scrum can get benefit from Kanban. And in fact, almost all the Scrum team now they use Kanban board, and they still call themselves Scrum. The Kanban board, hasn't done anything with the Scrum values and principles. They do everything that Scrum said, if that helps them. But they use Kanban board to
exactly.
visualize their work, and again it helps them to do their work better. All right, so I think it's a good time to wrap up.
Yep.
Do you want to summarize what we discussed, Soma?
Well, to start with, Kanban is not an agile framework. That is the summary. And we did talk about what is agile framework, like how
Mm-hmm.
can we define it, and that is again based on our opinion, you and me. We have tried to define it, and we would love to hear from others if they agree or not agree. And
Mm-hmm.
also we have tried to define that why Kanban is not an agile framework, what are the differences, and one of the best thing that can happen to Kanban is that you can actually apply it with any other framework that you are currently using or
Mm-hmm.
practicing. So so that none of them loses any of their core
Yeah,
values and properties.
exactly. So Kanban can help whatever you do, just do it better. It can be agile or waterfall or whatever.
Yep,
Kanban is, in fact, it's a method of knowledge management, basically. So it
exactly.
just help you to manage your work.
Yes. And
Okay, but it doesn't draw the line, it doesn't
line.
limit you.
Yes.
You can
Yes.
cross the line how you want to do it, it's up to you, but
Yeah.
you're still using and benefiting from Kanban.
Yes. And the main thing that everyone needs to always remember, focus on the goal, which is to achieve agility, not the vehicle to reach there. How you are reaching
Exactly.
there, you can choose anything, but the goal is always agility, which Kanban or Agile both can help you to reach there.
All right. So thanks everyone for listening, and we come back next week. Thanks, Soma.
Thanks, Aura. Thank you all.